Present. Eglash, present.
All present.
Foster, present.
Okay, are there any members of the public that would like to address any item not on the agenda? Seeing none, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion or a comment?
My comment is it was the most interesting minutes to read in quite some time, given our extended parliamentary action last time, and I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Can I just...
So I must abstain because I wasn't there.
Oh, okay, but I want to see someone else's copy of the minutes.
Yeah.
Here's
Okay,
the updated.
because mine doesn't...
Here's the real
look right.
front page.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm sorry. We had
Yeah,
a
there was
motion.
there was a glitch in the printing, but
Okay.
it looked fine.
That
So
was just a printing error.
yeah, so I move to approve.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposition. Passes. Second came from.
No, second was.
Sorry, Eglash. Okay. Agenda review and revisions. Any? Reports from. Thank you. Reports from commissioners. So I have two. Does anyone else have any?
I do not.
Okay. First of all, I attended the NCPA annual conference. Bringing clarity to the issues was the theme, and it was very interesting for me. I think it was good for the staff as well. Meeting with staff from NCPA and all the other utility members. Very interesting subject matter. Beautiful place. It was an excellent conference, very well put together, covering lots of different important areas. So I've got this if anyone wants to discuss the topics. It was just very well done, so I want to point that out. And the other meeting that I attended, took part in, was the, well, I can't remember now if it's been two meetings, but at least one of the meetings of the Technology in the Connected City Committee for the City Council, and I was there as the liaison. And so I think the key thing is that the committee is moving forward. So there's 2 or 3 months between the first two meetings, and so I was glad to see that there's some progress happening.
Is this the thing on fiber, or is this something else?
This is the fiber.
Fiber.
Yeah, fiber
Okay.
to the premises. And so it's essentially looking at what are some of the other cities that are doing this, a extensive review of what's happened, the history, the colored history of the fiber to the premises and fiber in general, the city, the colorful history, and hopefully some, it does seem like some momentum going forward to further study and hopefully some action on that. So those are my reports. And on to the Director of Utilities report.
Thank you very much, Chair Cook. Good to see you all. I have a few things to report on. And so in conjunction with the NCPA annual meeting that a number of us attended along with Chair Cook, also wanted to give you some updates on other NCPA activities. NCPA is developing a new strategic plan. One of the key goals in that plan is to form a new services entity that could offer services to other entities in order to increase agency revenues and lower costs for NCPA members. It's sort of an a la carte kind of services offering that they plan to make to anyone who's willing to come in and pay for it. In order to be in a position to offer these services, NCPA has undergone an exhaustive review of its governance agreements. These agreements have been under review by staff in the City Attorney's Office and will soon go forward to the NCPA Commission. These were agreements that were very outdated and really did require a number of updates in order to make sense to not only to NCPA members, but to other members who might look at NCPA services. After the NCPA Commission approves the strategic plan and the governance agreements, the governance agreements must be approved by our City Council. The tentative schedule for NCPA Commission approval of the agreements is the end of the year, and then subsequent to NCPA Commission approval, we'll bring it to our council. These are a number of operating agreements that we have that define the services and what we'll pay for those services that we get from NCPA. On the communications front, for PG&E, the gas transmission pipeline-related projects are winding up in October, including the building of the PIG launching facility on East Bayshore. However, some new electric tower-related projects are on the horizon, and the first one starts next week. This new project, which will take place mostly on weekends in October, involves raising the height of several of PG&E's electric line towers out near our municipal golf course, and much of the work will be done by helicopter. And if you are curious, there will be details on our website. Safety and emergency preparedness. September was Emergency Preparedness Month, and CPAU participated in several community events, including the citywide Neighborhood Safety Prep Fair on the 8th and the Quakeville event on September 21st. We expanded our materials and giveaways related to utility safety, including outreach aimed at young people, and we'll continue this focus through the year. And I'm sure I'm stealing our thunder, but we actually brought some of the materials here for you to see. Recent recognition, eSource Large Gap and Priority Survey, and Vice Chair Foster was suggesting that we make sure people are aware of this, rated our key account reps #1. In a recent eSource nationwide survey, the City of Palo Alto Utilities came in first place with its customers, giving both the utility and individual key account representatives high scores for delivering outstanding value and service. Awards were given out at the eSource annual national conference last month. Not always easy to, for instance, come in ahead of Santa Clara.
And just to clarify on that again, so our customer account representatives who work with large customers were rated the highest.
That's correct.
Pretty cool.
It's very wonderful. And a real testimonial to their hard work. Events and workshops, Qualified Water Efficient Landscaper Training, QWEL. Palo Alto Utilities co-sponsored the first ever South Bay Qualified Water Efficient Landscaper Training, which again is QWEL, Qualified Water Efficient Landscaper, with the Santa Clara Valley Water District and San Jose Water Company. That was on August 21st through 23rd. This class was attended by about 50 landscape contractors and crews, city and county park staff, independent landscape designers, and homeowners. QWEL is an education and certification program geared toward landscape professionals. Graduates receive certification of their training, continuing education credits, and are added to a roster of skilled QWEL trained gardeners. Then we have the San Jose State University Water and Energy Policy Analysis presentation. Catherine Elvert was invited to speak at San Jose State University at their energy policy analysis class on the connection between water and energy policy. For this discussion, Ms. Elvert brought Tom Cabot out of retirement to provide a perspective on hydrological resources and energy policy implications. The discussions included the potential energy savings, CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions reductions associated with water efficiency conservation, water recycling, and alternative non-potable water reuse programs. It was also an opportunity to inspire college students to pursue a career in water and/or energy resources management. And we really do want to encourage folks to do that. Gray Water Workshop on September 28, Palo Alto Utilities hosted a laundry to landscape gray water workshop attended by 40 people. The course provided education about all types of gray water systems and offered a hands-on portion in which attendees identified parts of and assembled a mock laundry to landscape clothes washer system. We continue to observe growing support in the community for the city to offer education and incentives for gray water. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Congratulations again on the award.
Okay, as we have no unfinished business, we'll go into new business. The first item is presentation on celebrating public utilities.
Our communications manager, Debbie Katz, is here to give you a brief presentation. And you'll show a video starring a number of utilities employees, is that correct?
Yes.
Shh, don't give it away. Spoiler alert. All right, I'm going to apologize in advance for anything that doesn't go perfectly here, because, as I said, I just came off jury duty and we aren't as organized as I would like to be. But basically, October is when Public Power Week and Public Natural Gas Weeks occur. But I felt that since we are more than just electricity and gas here, that I wanted to just focus on October being Public Utilities Month and celebrating the utilities that Palo Alto has and the benefits that having our own utilities gives, and trying to get that message out to the public. We try to do that all year round, but this gives us a reason to focus on it, particularly in this month. So to that end, I wanted to give you a little idea of what we're going to do this month. And we have, created a website item that people will see if they go to our homepage, fairly easily to click on, that has a lot of things on it, including this kind of quick summary of the benefits that they're getting for having public power. And we find that when we go out to various events all year round, that we often end up having conversations with people, or why can't we do this, or PG&E does that, and we actually welcome those kinds of questions and comments, because it gives us a chance to point out the significant value that they have by having their own utilities versus being in an investor-owned utilities territory. So we've developed the website, and our outreach to the community also then is going to include the advertisement you see there is an insert card in the Palo Alto Weekly, but putting messages on the bills. We're going to send out an alert to the media in the next day or so, to the neighborhood groups, encouraging people to go to the website, hopefully, and seeing some of the more detail we have there. But we're also trying to get out in the community a little extra in October. We have 3 things kind of for sure, and several more that we're working on. So we hope to find a way to run into a good percentage of the population before the month is over. The solar home tour is happening anyway, but we're going to just have a general public utilities oriented booth there as part of that when the tour starts at the Lucy Stern Center, so people see the eco home that's there and will be located there, and then having a booth at the Town and Country Shopping Center as indicated. And then we have some fun ideas of turning the eco home into a haunted house for Halloween, and we will be still focusing on safety and efficiency and those things, but looking for a little more exciting way perhaps to lure people into those topic areas. The final thing that I wanted to mention tonight is the video. It's singing. It involves, as I say, no rehearsals, no professional actors or singers. I think that's going to be extremely evident. But it's just the utilities employees, as I say, expressing that we have some strong feelings about our commitment to the community that we serve, and that we've been doing this for a long time. And I just wanted to mention in the video, you will see some individual employees singing. You will, in the chorus, it sounds like a lot of people. It was a lot of people. It's almost all 230 of the utilities employees together singing the chorus. You don't see them, you just hear them. And I feel obligated to mention that if you notice my cameo, it is because our field service guys were quite willing to sing along when we were all a big group, but felt very reluctant to stand there and sing when it would be just a few of them. And the only way I could get them to do it was I dressed up like one of them. And it got them to come out with me. And so I'm just explaining that. You'll understand it all when you see it. Now I have to figure out, Kristen, can you advise me? Because I already have clicked something on. It's minimized. Which one is it?
Here.
apologize that we didn't get this all worked out in advance. All right, buckle your seatbelts. I'm not hearing anything. Oh, that's a problem. Okay. Let's see if we can. I don't. It's probably my eyesight because I just can't see the thing.
Oh my God.
And I will do that because I'm not going to let this opportunity. Bear with us. This is the last part, though, so if we get to this. Is another one of our student interns that he
So
filmed the video.
is it up on YouTube yet?
Yeah. No, we're actually, but we're looking to get it posted around. But we
Sure.
This is its debut was here tonight.
Right, so it is online.
Yeah.
So can we have that link to share with our families and friends? Yeah, that's just great.
I'm going to let Val take that one.
We were just waiting to get full clearance from the city attorney's office.
I was waiting for the city attorney comment.
Well, no, she actually wasn't the one who, I asked her the question, is it okay if we put, because it does use a very familiar tune, so we just want to make sure it was okay. So.
And I don't think we threatened the original authors with our version.
Yeah, we don't think we do either, but
check.
Yeah. In an abundance of caution, we thought we should do the right thing.
In all seriousness, if you can, I would put it on YouTube. It may attract a few hundred viewers and that's it, but sometimes these things get more attention.
Which is why we were allowed to show it here, because we weren't sure there would be a whole lot of people watching.
Yeah, we have, if we are authorized to, I have a lot of ideas.
It's really wonderful.
Yeah,
On the other hand, you have a couple of members of the press here, so this is ready to get going.
Yeah, I think that was a lot of fun. Well done.
Great. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you didn't get the UAC to sing in that. That would have been.
You know,
You're giving her ideas.
she is not below, she's not beneath this sort of thing.
I want just to mention one other thing I'm throwing out here. You didn't see it. Is we talked about expanding our safety stuff. We come up with safety kits.
Thanks.
Debbie,
very much.
I also felt that your idea for October 30th with the Halloween theme was pretty remarkable. That sounds very innovative. It's very great.
All right, item number 2, discussion of potential transfer of a portion of the city's individual water supply guarantee.
So we have Senior Resource Planner Nico Prokos here to walk us through, tee up sort of the discussion that we hope you all have about a possible transfer. Just so you know, and I should clarify this, we did have an internal promotion. We promoted Debbie Lloyd, who I think you'll all recall. She typically works on our legislative regulatory stuff, to be our utilities compliance manager. And we actually asked Nico if he would think about taking kind of Debbie's old responsibilities around the legislative regulatory work, and he agreed to do that. So Nico, correct. So we'll eventually start to phase Nico out of some of the water issues, but for now he's got 2 jobs.
Okay, thanks, Val. So tonight, the item before you is a water transfer discussion, and we have a brief presentation here just to get the thought process flowing. I do want to mention before I get into the discussion that you will recall in February we came before you with what was called a preliminary assessment of water resource alternatives, kind of teeing up our water IRP process, which was going to unfold over the next 2 to 3 years. And an element of that was a supply guarantee transaction. It was a small element. I think it was only about a page long. And so we're hoping that this discussion will be a little bit more detailed, kind of dive into that issue. So the purpose tonight, we want to begin the water transfer dialogue, and there was a schedule which is also included in this presentation and was in your memo that I think gives a very detailed idea of, there's a lot of steps here. But this is just, we're kicking the issue off and starting that dialogue. Clearly we want to get feedback. That's the whole purpose of the item tonight. And also there's a community engagement element to this. And so there's going to be several public forums where people can participate. And then I think this is going to be really helpful for us to refine our focus when we get to finally go to City Council and discuss this issue with them.
Quick question, if I may. This is listed as an action item on the agenda, but you're just seeking feedback. There's no actual decision.
Yeah. Just feedback.
So we're not taking a vote on anything.
No.
Thank you.
So this, is this on? Yeah. So this chart was in your memo, and I think gives a pretty good representation of what we're contemplating here or bringing forward. And on the y-axis, you see that it gives you the water use in 1 million gallons per day. And I'm pleased to report that in this memo, we stuck with 1 million gallons per day, and we did not jump around between CCF and acre feet, which I believe was a concern from the preliminary assessment. So I think we're good there. And on the y-axis gives you the year, and there's a historical representation here, and there's also a forecast, and you see up there the 2010 demand forecast gives a look out to 2030. This demand forecast was developed as part of our urban water management plan process, which was brought to you as part of leading up to final City Council approval. So we have a model which has a whole variety of inputs, including population, employment, and other factors that go into the development of that forecast. And so we've included that there to give a sense of where we think things are going to go over the next 20 or 30 years. We did have a chance to consult with the planning department. We wanted to make sure that this was still a good representation. And while there are some projects which are being planned, we do think that it's still a relevant forecast, and it still captures a lot of what's planned and what's going to happen in the future. And then on the top part of the chart, you see the individual supply guarantee. That's that green line. And we've provided a representation of what would happen under a 1 million gallon per day sale and a 2 million gallons per day sale. And I think the takeaway here is that under normal year situations, the impact of a 1 or 2 MGD sale is not as pronounced, I guess, as might be. It's not a big issue, and we came to that conclusion in the memo. And just to reiterate that, a sale of 1 to 2 million gallons per day, we don't anticipate that that's going to impact normal year supplies. We did go into a bit of detail on the dry year supplies. That definitely is an issue in the memo, and we identified that. A sale of 1 million gallons per day does require an additional 2 to 3% reduction during a dry year, and a sale of 2 million gallons per day will require an additional 4 to 5% reduction during a dry year. So that definitely is a factor for consideration in terms of the impact of a sale, and hopefully we'll have a good discussion about that this evening. And I do want to emphasize that the current dry year water allocation formula expires in 2018, so it's really only in effect for the next 5 years, and it could look quite different. The supply guarantee right now is an element of that formula. It's and I wasn't going to go into a whole lot of detail of the drought allocation formula. Certainly, if people want to drill down, we can do that. But it does have a factor in the ultimate final allocation. Now, in terms of obviously, when we bring something like this forward, we're bringing this forward to have part of the discussion is what if there were significant revenues or revenues from a sale, what would we use those revenues for? And this is not an exhaustive list. This is something that we just put together, certainly, and these are standalone, or also it could be a combination of above. Many of these were identified in the preliminary assessment, which was provided last February. And so, this runs from conservation programs. Certainly, there's a future rate increase offset potential there. There's the recycled water project, which is quite expensive. It has a high price tag associated with it. We certainly can use the revenues to offset dry year supply deficiencies, and there's a variety of mechanisms to do that, including retrofitting some of our well system so we can rely on that in dry years. And there's also a West Pipeline extension to the Santa Clara Valley Water District system, which would allow access to, obviously that's a little bit more of that's a reliability issue that diversifies the supply portfolio, and also there's a potential cost savings there as well. So we wanted to provide some policies just to kind of give a framework of the discussion. And certainly these are the ones that we identified. There may be others as we go through this process, but we think right now these are the ones that, and for purposes of this discussion, that I think we wanted to bring forward for your consideration. The comprehensive plan does have a natural element part to it, and water resources that are prudently managed to sustain plant and animal life, support urban activities, and protect public health and safety. That's a bit kind of all-encompassing, but that's in the comprehensive plan. And part of that is policy N19, which is secure, reliable, long-term supply of water for Palo Alto. In the Water Integrated Resource Plan guidelines that were established in the last IRP update around 2003, one of the guideline number 1 is preserve and enhance SFPUC supplies. And the first bullet there is clearly we want to ensure that we can meet future water needs. And then the second one is adequate supplies during a drought. So that's something that was identified as an issue, and certainly regarding an ISG transaction needs to be factored in. And finally, there's the municipal code regarding disposition of surplus property equipment. It's interesting, I don't think they contemplated a sale of our water supply entitlement when they maybe created this section of the municipal code, but we think that it is applicable to some degree to the transaction. And there's also, excuse me, there's also some potential additional policy considerations, and these are not embodied in any official policy that's been approved by the City Council or anybody else, but there's certainly things that over the years, as this issue has come up, it's been, these have, some of them have come to the forefront, and we just wanted to provide these to you, again, for your consideration as part of this discussion. The regional population and employment growth, so clearly smart growth. This is a big issue in the area. I think there's the ABAG projections regarding population and employment, and the allocation to Palo Alto has been an issue and has been discussed and debated at the council level. And certainly that's something that I think is important to keep in mind. The second bullet there is balancing potential use restrictions with deference to local BOSCA agency decision making. So I think what the attention of that one is, when you think of, I think many people might have some concerns over not only the mechanics of such a transaction, but also a counterparty. What would a counterparty use the water for? Would it be used in a responsible manner? And so there is that. I think that's something that is important, and clearly, I think that it needs to be, in consideration of community values. On the other hand, there also is the deference to local, to other agency decision making. So there's a bit of a balancing act there. Certainly, we've had a lot of discussion, but we think that it would be worthwhile for you to keep that in mind and also give us some feedback on that. And I think the council would appreciate that as well. And then also future local and regional sustainability initiatives. And that's also important. And Val, I think we wanted to change this, didn't we? Yeah. Okay. I can go ahead and do it. So these are the next steps, and this schedule was identified in your memo. I do want to say that we've had some discussions since we created this, and I think the plan right now is in November 2013, instead of a City Council discussion and feedback, we would change that to a Finance Committee discussion and feedback, and then the February 2014 UAC recommendation to proceed, and I think it just continues the same as it is right there. There isn't, right, it becomes a recommendation in February 2014 to UAC, Finance, City Council, and then a formal solicitation. The only change is instead of November, we go to City Council. This will go to Finance Committee instead for a discussion. That concludes my presentation. We can open it up to questions.
Yeah, we have one member of the public who'd like to speak on this item, Herb Brock.
Thank you, Chair Cook, and good evening, Commissioners. I should think that something like this, it's a fairly easy policy question for the City Council to decide upon on whether to proceed with this kind of a study before all this work's been done on it. What we're suggesting of the alternatives are, well, one, possibly lowering bills. Well, the water supply is only a portion of the bill, and this is a small fraction of the water supply. So to the extent that Proposition 218 requires giving the money back to the ratepayers as probably the only alternative that there is, you can sort of make a rough estimate of how much that's going to be as a percentage on a bill based on those, and it's not going to be much. Other alternatives are to use the money to obtain lower quality water than the water that we'd be providing to somebody else. Either having recycled water or water from Santa Clara Valley Water District or water from our wells. And I don't think that makes much sense. And then the reason why this water would be used by someone else is for development someplace else. So for all those reasons, it seems to me to spend another 4 months before the Commission even makes a recommendation, before the Council's had an opportunity to say whether it's even a worthwhile idea to pursue, is not a wise way of proceeding from my point of view. Just in the question of the recycled water project, the customer, maybe there's more than one, but at least one customer who will be benefiting by it, should be the ones who be paying for the benefit of that recycled water project, rather than having it somehow paid for by this idea that all customers would be charged. So for all those reasons, it seems to me that it make more sense. It would be a simple item on the council agenda to see whether the council believes that an idea like this should be pursued, and it's one that would be very easily understood by the public as to what they're being asked to do. To the extent that there is any kinds of conservation programs being paid for, you have to remember that the customers would still have to pay all of those fixed expenses, whether they're all the upgrades made by to Hetch Hetchy, whether they're staff salaries and our own capital improvements, and on a lower total water usage, that per unit price would go up to cover those fixed expenses. So I think we just put the simple question on the council agenda at an early date of whether to pursue this. I think the council, after listening to the public comment, would reject the idea and will save a lot of staff time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the comment, and thanks for being here. Okay, comments from the commissioners?
Peanut Gallery. Okay, a few things. I just want to make sure we have the facts down here and we understand everything clearly. Palo Alto gets all of its water from San Francisco and the Hetch Hetchy system. Our current guarantee is 17 million gallons per day, more or less. Our baseline demand currently, and is that correct? And our current use scenario is 11.6, roughly, million gallons per day, which is down substantially over the years, as we know, and that's a good thing. Our projected use in fiscal year 2018 is 13.33 million gallons per day, right? Because obviously we're sort of the long-term decline in water use. We think we're going to head up over time due to more residents, or what's leading to the anticipation of greater water use in a few years?
So the forecast, let me go back to this chart so everyone can see that. So the 2010 demand forecast does show, from when it was developed, a steep increase from essentially 2010 up until 2015. And a lot of that was to reflect a reflection of the rebound. There's been, the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a big drop in water use for all the water agencies really in the area, if not the state. And so that captured the expectations of a rebound. Now, some of that has shown up, as you can see there, the last 2 bars there in 2011 and 2012 reflect the fact that it's gone up, but it certainly hasn't gone up to the demand forecast. Now, our model, because the Urban Water Management Plan is a kind of a legislative requirement, there's a lot of expectations and requirements to use certain data for your forecast. And so we did rely on ABAG, population and employment growth, as part of our model, and that certainly gives a big allocation to Palo Alto and has an impact on the future demand growth. At the same time, we also did incorporate a very aggressive conservation program, which kind of offset a big jump that would come across with a big, if that population and employment ever materialized, which is an issue.
Right. Okay. Now, and I'm looking, just for everyone's reference, I'm looking at the staff memo, and I'm looking at table number 1. Table number 1 indicates, again, that our baseline demand is currently 11.63 million gallons per day, projected use going up to 13.33 in 2018. In a drought scenario, our allocation would be reduced from 17 million gallons a day to just under 9 million gallons per day, right? Am I understanding that correctly? The drought allocation, I'm looking on the second line, drought allocation. Again, I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly.
So the 17 million gallons per day is, I think of it as an entitlement. The Tier 2 drought allocation formula incorporates an element that's associated with that entitlement. So essentially what it does is a third of that formula looks at your usage relative to your entitlement. And so for Palo Alto, because we have such a high entitlement and our usage is so much lower, that's a very beneficial formula for us. The other part of that formula is based on, the other 2/3 of that formula is based on your seasonal water use. And so as you're aware, Palo Alto is very peaky. It has a big summertime jump. And so that actually, the two kind of, balance each other out. So the 17 million gallons per day is just factored in that formula. I wouldn't think of it in terms of that our drought allocation drops from 17 to, what is that number, 8.94. It's really your usage to 8.94.
Your usage. Because I look at this, and just from my perspective, I say we need 11.63, but in a drought, we're going to get 8.94, which is, as you've indicated, 23% below our baseline usage. That requires, it's not undoable, but it requires some significant savings, right?
Right.
But here's the key point. So we go in 2018, and let's assume our demand has gone up to 13.33. Now our drought allocation is 10.41. And why is it higher? It's higher because we're using more? In other words, this is in a situation where we haven't sold anything yet. And so it's sort of a little counterintuitive. Basically, we're still at 17.0 or whatever it is, and we're getting more. I'm trying to figure out how important this assumption of growth is, or is not. But anyway, so take a crack at that one.
So I think what you're referring to is the percentage reduction drops as you go out to 2018. Is that
right.
What you're, okay, so, and that's a very good question and a very good observation. And part of the reason, I think the main reason that happens is the drought allocation formula, where we end up depends a lot on what other agencies are doing. So, if their demand increases, we would, and ours doesn't increase as fast, then that is beneficial to us.
Okay.
And that's what's being reflected here, is that over the next 5-6 years, a lot of other agencies are expected to really increase their demand, and we are also doing that, but at a lesser trajectory. And so that's why that has that.
And so I can assume then, I think from what you're saying, is that if our demand, and don't worry, in a few minutes I'll stop asking questions, guys. If our demand did not go up as much as expected, then our reduction from demand in a drought scenario would be even less. In other words, I think I'm right about that. And that's an important.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it does depend on what other agencies are doing, and I think it's also important to emphasize, and I think we did put a footnote here that, this is our approximation.
Right.
We don't know what other agencies what's going to happen with them, and so it's difficult to really nail it down.
The other thing is it would be a smaller reduction off of a smaller number.
Right.
So
and of course,
the number wouldn't be as high. It might be lower than this.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, what it boils down to me is I'm looking at this memo and I'm saying, okay, drought allocation, reduction for what really boils down is what's the reduction from the baseline demand, either in absolute number terms or percentage terms. And what we're seeing here is that if we sell 1 million or 2 million gallons per day, in a drought scenario, we're going to lose something, but not the full 1 million or 2 million. And getting our hands around that, in your 2018 scenario, after a 1 million gallon sale, we don't lose 1 million, we lose 330,000 gallons per day or something like that. And if we sell 2 million, we lose, in a drought scenario, 600,000 gallons per day. And those, whether those numbers are 600,000 or 100,000 or 1 million makes a big difference. Okay, so I think it's just important to note that. And now I'm going to make my recommendation, and then I won't say anything more. In terms of,
is that a guarantee?
I am supportive of looking at selling the 1 to 2 million under this, given the numbers described. if we can find a use for the proceeds that addresses what would happen in a drought year. So to me, a recycled water project would help that. Offsetting dry year supply deficiency would support that. Santa Clara Valley Water District West Pipeline Extension would do so. But offsetting future rate increases does not do so. So I think selling some of our water supply just to decrease, I mean, I'm all for decreasing rates when we can, but a one-time sale of our water supply to decrease future rates does not make sense to me, nor am I necessarily that supportive of using it to fund conservation programs. Not that I'm not very supportive of conservation programs, but I think we've done a lot on conservation. And again, I think we need things that specifically address a drought year. Okay, that's it from me.
Thank you, Commissioner Foster. Commissioner Hall?
Yeah, I'd like to build on. Just take a pause. I'd just like to build on what Commissioner Foster has discussed and look to that FY 2018 scenario. And I also noted that the sale, let's just take the 2 MGD sale, would leave Palo Alto with 0.6 MGD less in a dry year, based on the formula and all the assumptions you discussed. So I'm in sync with his idea, Commissioner Foster's idea, that we might be in a situation here where we're losing something in a drought which would cause us to want to do something to make it up. I'd realize there is a case, because of the uncertainty of demand, that we may be in a situation where we're fine. Demand stays very low, much lower than you've predicted, and the 0.6 MGD may be not a big deal. But there is a case that the demand may be as you projected, or even a little higher, in which the 0.6 MGD that you've lost in the dry year needs to be replaced. I'm assuming that rationing already at the 20% level or 24% level is about as aggressive as you could hope to get through public policy, pleadings to the cities and so on. So I'm back on the point that 0.6 MGD is something you want to look at. So what's missing, I think, in terms of understanding where this would be beneficial or not, is what it would cost you to replace it. And Commissioner Foster actually went through the items, and I did take a look at the February 13 preliminary assessment, and I think that the closest thing, this is not a prescription, it's just thought, the closest substitute to that would probably be the choice of increasing your groundwater supplies to additional wells, the blending combination. Since that is focused on the dry year, probably the capital cost involved with that would be analogous to what you would have to do if you wanted to make up 0.6 MGD. And I took a look at the numbers, and I think it would be helpful. I don't want to get too into those because I think it'd be better if you did, but it would be important for us to know what it would take in cost, capital cost, and maybe some O&M cost, but particularly capital cost, to replace the 0.6 MGD.
Yeah, and we have given that some thought, and I also want to clarify something, that there's a variety of different structures to such a transaction. We did touch upon that in the memo. It doesn't necessarily mean that it would be a one-time payment, for example. There have been some recent term sheets, so not a transaction, which have contemplated more of an annual payment over a 20 or 30-year period. And we did mention that in the preliminary assessment, and there were some numbers associated with that. And so there's a variety of different ways that the money could flow. Certainly, as we think about this, if it was just going to generate enough revenues to eliminate the deficit associated with the sale for dry years, it's not something we're going to go forward with at that point. We think that it has, certainly we feel that based on recent activity, that it certainly has enough value there, potential value there, that it could address that issue and maybe even more. So instead of the 22% baseline, you could reduce that even further. So in some sense, it's kind of like an optimization strategy. We're long in normal year supplies. We're short in dry year supplies. Is there some way we can shift things around and take care of that?
And just to
Excuse me,
complete,
I just wanted to add something to that. Let's say one of the options for us in a drought, even without this sale, is to use groundwater as supplemental supply.
right.
And so if we use, for example, 1 MGD in a drought, and then it would be, we'd use it, that would be how much we'd use before and after selling the water. So if you kind of look at the numbers in Table 1, so the reduction in current use, let's just look at the 2018 one. And so it says the reduction has to be 2.92. If we used 1 MGD as supplemental supply from groundwater, then the reduction would be 1.92. But then after you sold 1 MGD of supply assurance or supply guarantee, then it would be 2.25 MGD. So you'd go from 1.92 to 2.25. So the increased percentage of cutback is actually greater if you already plan to use the groundwater anyway in a drought. You see what I mean?
I think so. I also think that the idea of looking at recycling is a consideration, although I think with recycling you're looking at a around the year benefit, which would be more driven by a bulk displacement of water year round, and so it's very difficult to take the economics of recycling as a replacement for a drought supply. Although if you are going to use recycling for policy reasons or to offset long-term average supply, it certainly does come into play big time in the drought because it's always there. So I think that your analysis would look at the cases of additional recycling, which may reduce your net demand, and also perhaps the groundwater, additional use of the groundwater, even if you, as Ms. Ratchie says, even if you are planning to do some, there would be additional amounts. So I think you'd have to run the numbers and show what is the crossover point, and you'd want to have a contingency there so that you cover the additional costs that may be incurred that you don't fully have penciled out when you go into the project for groundwater use.
For the recycled water project, I mean, the project that's being evaluated to go to the research park, that's, I mean, for most recycled water projects right now in this area, they're really focused on irrigation use. And as we identified in the memo, one of the benefits of the recycled water project provides a big benefit for the current Tier 2, the drought allocation formula, in the sense that it reduces that peakiness that I mentioned was part of the formula, and it also drops us further down below our supply guarantee. So it's possible that you could use the proceeds to help make that project more viable, and once that project comes online, you know, that could certainly have benefits from the dry year allocation formula. Having said that, you know, that formula expires in 2018. Even if the recycled water project was approved today, you know, it's going to take 3 or 4 years, and it's not going to be approved today.
Right, right. And may I just conclude? So the thing that would be helpful, to me at least, would be to run some numbers in some cases and say, okay, recycled water would be developed to a certain degree, the groundwater would be used to some degree, and additional amounts would be needed to offset the sale of the 2 MGD or the 1 MGD, and then you would be able to have a sense of what your proceeds would have to be to cover those costs. And I realize in asking for that, it may put the city in a slightly awkward moment, and this is a public discussion, and so those who are interested in the purchase would become very focused on those numbers because they may think that that's all they would need to pay. But I'm hoping that, as you indicated in your memo, that you have a potentially competitive situation here, where notwithstanding the cost you need to cover to offset this dry air loss, you would have some competition based on the value to the potential buyers rather than just bidding at our cost.
You won't hear this very often, but I encourage you guys to, if you have more to say, please say it, because I think this is an important time to get our opinion in this process. So usually I like to move things on. So if you,
You want me to say
you,
more?
but the other ones, no. I mean, honestly, if you guys have anything more to say, are you okay?
Should I go next?
Did you want to say something?
No,
or? Okay.
You're working down the
Commissioner
line.
Eglash.
First of all, your presentation was a model of relevance and brevity and appropriateness, so thank you for a terrific presentation. You know, the fact that we have an individual supply guarantee that's in excess of our current demand is a terrific thing. It's hugely valuable to the people that live and work in Palo Alto, and the fact that we managed through conservation to reduce our water usage from the 1970s to 1980s, so that now in normal years we're using way less than our individual supply guarantee. I mean, it's a great thing. It's a great thing for the environment, but it's also a great thing for people in Palo Alto when we have droughts, because it means that the pain that's inflicted on us during those drought allocations is less than it would have been otherwise. And so the problem with selling part of that individual supply guarantee is there's going to be more pain inflicted on us in Palo Alto in those drought years than if we don't sell any of our individual supply guarantee. So I'm really having a hard time seeing why this is a good idea. In particular, I'm concerned it's a very bad idea. It's true we're selling something that, based on that chart that's on the screen right now, that looks like something we don't need, but that's based on average years. And when there are droughts, even now we're getting less water than we need and want. And if we go ahead with the sale, we're going to get even less than that. So I'm seriously concerned about the sale, and my feeling is it's probably a very bad idea. But I think it may be even worse than I just said. You know, one of the things we've learned in the last few years is that most climate models, based on the last several decades, are turning out to not be accurate going forward. Climate change and extreme weather events like extended droughts are becoming more prevalent. And climate scientists may not understand the details of extreme weather events like extended droughts, but the evidence is accumulating that the last few decades aren't a terrific predictor of the next couple of decades. And so if it turns out that the current drought that we're in turns out to be deeper with even less rainfall or of longer duration than historic trends would indicate we ought to expect, then the future, maybe even the short future between now and 2018, might turn out to be worse than your model predicts. And so that has a couple implications. It means we might regret the sale even more. I think we'd regret it even if climate conditions didn't change, but we might regret it even more. It might also mean, though, that the monetary value of the sale, if you do it in a few years, is going to be even greater than you do it now. It might be that opportunities to sell a portion of our individual supply guarantee, if we wanted to do it, that it might be even worth more later than now, and we might be selling too soon and leaving water on the table, money on the table, pun intended. It's not clear that groundwater is going to be available if there's an extended drought. The whole question of maintaining the aquifer and the rate at which it gets replenished, we all understand, is pretty complicated and particularly not so obvious if there's an extended drought. Recycled water is great, but it's full of challenges also. The salt content's pretty high in recycled water. Not all of our trees can handle it well, as we know. So I think that's my primary concern, to not be so inclined to look upon this as something that's in excess of what we need, but to realize that in drought years, it's a sort of cushion that's softening the blow.
So if I could just briefly respond, there's very valid and good points. I do want to mention again, though, that the drought formula, Tier 2 formula, does expire in 2018, and I will share with you, having worked on the current formula, that the inclusion of the supply guarantee in that formula was not, that was a difficult challenge to get other agencies to buy into that. And so I think right now that formula is, you know, I think we're happy with it. Where it ended up, I think we're very happy with it. Is there a risk that it could be worse next time? Yeah, I don't think it's going to get any better. I think it would go in the other direction, but certainly it was a real challenge to get that included in the current formula.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. When I recall the prior discussion of a few months ago, it seemed to me that we all spent a lot of time trying to understand if, when the SFPUC and BOSCA change things in the future, either in 2018 when the formula gets changed as you described, or if the total amount of water available is different so that they're forced to rewrite the guidelines. It seemed to me that we were all struggling to understand, at least I was, whether going forward the historical individual supply guarantee is going to be part of the discussion and relevant in the future formula, or whether it's just going to be totally thrown out and we're just going to look at other factors, historic usage, maybe you start charging people more so that conservation is forced by someone's willingness to pay. And I'd love to hear your comments on it, but my recollection of that prior discussion that we had here is that we spent a lot of time trying to understand, will the historic individual supply guarantee have any impact at all, any relevance at all if formulas need to get rewritten? And it seemed to me we just fundamentally didn't know. That's just unknowable at this point in time. And so again, why would we do something that potentially undermines our negotiating position at some uncertain date in the future when that could be a really tough negotiation and one that has huge implications for Palo Alto? I mean, no one can sit here today and say, gee, if we sell 1 or 2 MGDs out of that 17 MGD ISG, it doesn't matter. When that negotiation happens, we'll still be able to say, we're Palo Alto and our ISG was 17. Ignore the fact that we sold 1 or 2. It's not clear that that argument will carry any water. It may be that people will say, no, 17 is not relevant for this discussion. You sold 1 or 2, so that's gone. You were communicating that you didn't need it and you didn't want it. So the starting point for Palo Alto's negotiation going forward incorporates the sale. So it's 16 or 15, not 17. Wow, I would hate to give up that 1 or 2 out of 17 if in some, proportional basis, the 17 might allow us to get more when that negotiation happens in the future.
You want to start with that, Commissioner Martin?
Can I ask, or can we ask a question of commissioners as they chat? Commissioner Glash, in the event a sale allowed us to use the funds to do something that would more than offset, or at least offset, the downside, would that be okay?
Yeah, it depends how much money, and I'd be happy to take the discussion in the direction of trying to estimate how much money we think we could get for the sale so that we could start to try to get our heads around the value of that and what we might do with it. in the interest of sort of time and scoping the discussion, I hadn't taken the conversation there yet. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, as the old joke goes, we're just quibbling over the price. And there's undoubtedly some monetary value where you'd say that the money is worth so much, and because we can do good things with it that have an impact on the water supply, that we would be willing to do it. And I see we have some comments on.
We anticipated that. So let me just walk you through this, and this was also mentioned in the preliminary assessment, but I think it gives a better representation here. And these I do want to preface the discussion that these are not deals that happened. The first one is an offer that we received from Parisima Hills Water District in 2009 for half an MGD, and you can see there the offer was a one-time payment of $1 million. We did decline to consider that deal for a whole host of reasons, pricing and also policy. And then the second potential transfer is a more recent one, and I think this one right now is at the term sheet stage, and a lot of our motivation, or a factor in our motivation to bring this forward to you, is I think that this is worthy of consideration in terms of things have certainly increased, I guess, since that 2009 transfer. This one is between another Bosque agency, Brisbane, and really a developer. They want to develop an area in their service territory, and an irrigation district adjacent to the San Francisco MID TID service area, and so there's going to be some kind of a middleman kind of transaction, but essentially Brisbane will get SFP Hetch Hetchy water. In this case, the term sheet specifies for 2.14 MGD, and it does have some, for the first 5 years, kind of more of a call option kind of structure, and so the price could be anywhere from $224,000 to $1.1 million, but after that, up to $1.1 million, depending on what they commit to in terms of how much water they want.
Not per year. The 224K to 1.1 million is not per year for 5 years. It's for 5 years.
Per year.
Per year.
Yep.
So the value over those 5 years is between $1.25 million and $5.5 million. So prices have gone up a lot.
Right now, this is just a term sheet, so you know, I don't know where it is at this point when we.
But again, you're sure it's per year? It doesn't say per year on the chart.
Let me check the preliminary assessment, but I'm pretty sure that it's per year.
Nico, can you clarify if the Oakdale deal includes the cost of the water itself?
So that is the cost of the water.
Okay, what we're talking about, our deal doesn't include the cost of the water.
So if I may just jump in, the first example is closer to the model of our deal, even though the price was not acceptable, the timing wasn't right for us. But the second one is more complicated because it presumably includes the delivery capacity as well as the water.
Yeah, and looking back at the preliminary assessment, here it says, if the city were to execute an agreement similar to the Brisbane-Oakdale transaction, a 2 MGD transfer might generate revenues of $224,000 to $1.1 million per year for the first 5 years, followed by up to $1.1 million per year for the duration of the transaction. And that 1.1 assumes 2.14 million gallons per day.
Okay, Commissioner Melton.
Thank you. Well, just to finish that thought, so because one of the questions I had is this even worth talking about? Do we think there's enough money in this to make it something to think about? And your answer is it's $1 million a year for a 2 MGD transfer or sale.
No, that's not my answer. My answer is This is something that has been put down on paper between two counterparties, and whether it actually goes to fruition, we don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. However, it's interesting.
Okay, so let me rephrase it. The example that we have to look at to try to put a value on what we might, a deal that like we might make, is this Oakdale Brisbane transaction, which, as I think you just read, for 2 MGD, it's $1 million a year to the end of the deal.
Pardon me? Yeah, that includes, it's for water.
Yeah, it's for water. Yeah, okay.
I mean, they still have to get it to Brisbane. And so I don't know, there's a wheeling charge or whether that would, they'd pay the regular price. I'm not really sure.
So to put $1 million a year in perspective, what's the total cost of running our water program for the city of Palo Alto in a year?
It's approximately 25 million.
And that's, just to be clear, that's what we pay for the water, or that's the total cost including all of the fixed costs?
That's the total utility.
So if we use that as, as something to compare against, we're talking about something that's like 4%, $1 million a year is like 4% of our total water budget. So $1 million a year is nice, but it's not changing anything we do. It's changing things in an incremental and marginal way. It's not like someone arrived with a basket and said, here's $100 million or $50 million, go do something that you couldn't have otherwise done.
Okay, so let me move on to a number of other questions I wanted to explore. First, I wanted to follow up on Jane's comments about groundwater. And I know we do, we're spending a lot of capital money currently upgrading our groundwater infrastructure and such. But there, at least at my last recall, there were limits all over this valley. We have a limit imposed on us on how much groundwater we can pump. Can you remind me of what those limits are?
Yeah, so the EIR for the emergency water supply and storage project, so that's the refurbishment of the 5 existing wells and drilling of the 3 new wells and some other activities related to our storage tanks and things. That EIR has a mitigation measure in there that specifies that we can only, during a dry year, we can only pump up to 1,500 acre feet per year from that system.
Okay.
Yeah. 1.2 MGD.
Okay.
Ish.
So, taking that into perspective, is that really a drought mitigate? If we're in a drought, and presumably if we are, we're pumping up to the limit that the county groundwater management, whoever sets those limits, allows, we're still going to be short, aren't we?
Yeah, we'll still be. There still will be a deficiency. Although in your memo, it does. It includes information from our urban water management plan regarding our drought response, and there's different levels of drought response. So we're not anticipating that you would use those wells immediately.
Yeah.
That's kind of down the list. I think we're looking for customer response and some other things which have been effective in the past and are usually pretty effective. And so, you wouldn't go to that to use the wells. I mean, the water quality of the wells, certainly, it meets primary and secondary standards, but it is not comparable to Hetch Hetchy water. So you turn on those wells, there's consumers adjacent to the wells will notice some changes. And so that certainly is a factor. It's not something that I think we would contemplate immediately coming to council and saying we should turn these on.
Okay. One of the potential uses of proceeds that you've pointed out, and which I think applies to the applicable policies and goals as well. You know, it's pretty clear that the city's plans, you know, a reliable long-term supply of water, future water needs can be met, adequate supplies during a drought. And it seems to me that, as we've talked about always a number of times before, is the West Pipeline into the Santa Clara Valley Water District. And I bring that up, as I recall, that's about an 8-mile connection that has to be built to hook us in from where they terminate now to where they would hook in to the Hetch Hetchy up by Page Mill, I think you said. And
I think it's less than that. I mean, from the preliminary assessment, we discussed that, an extension, and it looks to me like, yeah, maybe 2, maybe 3 miles.
Oh, okay.
Well, the pipeline already extends from San Jose to Mountain View. But the last time we looked at this, what the district actually wanted to do was, rather than just go back to where it ends in Mountain View, they want to parallel this pipeline all the way back to the treatment plant in San Jose, the Rinconada treatment plant. And they were loading a whole lot of costs onto this project that way. And so it could be, that pipeline is not in great shape, and so they were worried that if they extended it beyond, it wouldn't be that reliable of service. And so they proposed that, you know, it sounded like something that they kind of need to do anyway, is parallel that back. Yeah. So it's unclear how much that whole thing would cost, or how many miles of pipe really it would take. What we want them to do is take it from, whether they parallel it or not, take it all the way to San Francisco and interconnect it there. And then we essentially, just by connecting to San Francisco, have the access to that water anyway for reliability and emergency preparedness in general.
So it seems to me, though recycled water might be a partial solution to the, or help the drought offset, that really the only way we could assure a supply would be to invest in that Santa Clara Valley Water District connection, whatever that connection turns out to be. Because that, you know, that does give us a different source of water in the drought. I mean, it's Sacramento River water instead of Tuolumne River water, and so it has a different watershed, and it, you know, so it really is could be a true alternate source of supply, both on an ongoing basis, but particularly in a drought. And I'm not sure. I guess one way I would want to look at this is if we thought the income stream, whatever we think, whether it's a one-time payment or more, as you say, more likely an annual payment over a period of time. But even if it's that, that's bondable. So you know, you can if we thought that we could hook into the Santa Clara Valley Water District supply, in addition to our existing Hetch Hetchy supply, that if there was enough money in the deal to do that, that sort of makes sense. I mean, not sort of, that does make sense. But I'm not sure, I think short of that, I'm sort of in Steve's camp here, that I'm not sure that there's, you know, there just has to be enough money in it to do something do a project that really makes a difference, that really does give us some drought protection, that gives us an alternate source of supply, that...
Can I just ask or comment on one of the things you just said, Commissioner Melton? If building an additional pipeline makes sense, we can do it with or without selling a fraction of our supply guarantee. We invest in utilities all the time around here, and we can do it out of, we can finance that in a variety of ways. We can finance some things out of revenue and out of savings and out of bonds and so on. So we don't need to do a 1 or 2 MGD sale to build a pipeline. And, in fact, I think you could make a case that the prudent way to proceed would be, if we want to make an investment in that pipeline or in groundwater or in recycled water, let's make the investment first. Let's build it. Let's put it in place. And then if it turns out we no longer want the individual supply guarantee, then 5 years or 10 years from now or whenever, then we can sell 1 or 2 MGD.
I think the problem with that approach comes back to money. We've never had the money, or never felt that we had the money, to invest in the Santa Clara Water District pipeline or the recycled, the two big good ideas we have never gotten off the ground for lack of money.
Well, I guess to my thinking, it's not been for lack of money. I mean, to my thinking, we have lots of money. We have a huge CIP budget. Maybe it's not as big as we'd like, but we have a significant CIP budget. It allows us to do lots of things. We talk about how to use Calaveras money. We pass bonds when we need to pass bonds. So I would say that if we've not done those things, it's because we didn't deem them important enough.
The West Pipeline, as Jane mentioned, part of the issue is reaching agreement on the cost allocation formula, and so clearly there's a significant cost associated with this. If it has reliability, if it improves the reliability for their system and for the SFPUC system, that's kind of, everyone benefits from that. So that cost, we feel that cost, should be spread amongst everybody. But one of the challenges before was, how much we would have to absorb of that cost. And also you get into the world of you have a treated water contract with them that has minimum take or pay provisions, and you also are a contract with the SFPUC, which right now does not have a minimum take or pay provision, would likely be adjusted, and there is a potential that the ISG could be impacted because of that. Just a potential, it's not known for sure. But so it becomes, there's agencies in the county, Mountain View and Sunnyvale, that get treated water from both, and especially with the drop in water consumption, they've had difficulty not running afoul of those minimum take or pay. So it gets kind of it gets right.
And in a bit of probably support for Commissioner Melton's comments about money, we do have the highest rates, certainly amongst the BOSCA members, and this would require another rate to get that sort of funding for a large project like a recycle water project or this Santa Clara Valley Water District West Pipeline connection would require a rate increase on already very high rates.
And just to remind me, or remind us, of course we all pay the same for the water, but our distribution costs are higher, or do we not pay the same for the water among all the BOSCA agencies?
It's the water rate is the same. That is correct.
So but all the BOSCA members have different fractions of San Francisco, and so we who get 100%, we pay the same as Menlo Park, who also gets 100% San Francisco water, but Santa Clara is a much smaller fraction of Hetchy water.
So any jurisdiction that uses only partially San Francisco water will almost by definition have lower rates. But among jurisdictions like us that use 100% San Francisco water,
we still have the highest rates.
Because of higher local distribution costs?
Yes, and just we do have a water benchmarking we have already come to the UAC with that information, and we're coming back again. I think it's next.
I know we've discussed in the
In a
past.
couple of months, or I can't remember exactly when, you'll hear more about why our rates are so high.
And isn't it primarily because we've been investing in our water distribution infrastructure?
It's a big part.
Unlike some people that are mortgaging their future?
And if I could add one more thing about the West Pipeline, we are actively pursuing that option. The district last year completed a water master plan, and we requested that they include that in there. They said it will be included in a reliability plan, which is upcoming, and we did send a letter, I think several months ago, requesting that that project be included in there. So we're keeping on top of it. It's definitely an option.
So I guess as you know, when this whole thing started, what I was looking at, it was my original question is there enough money in this deal to make it even worth considering?
Well, that's a big question. You know, we don't know. That's the honest answer. But I think what we're contemplating, and we included this in the report under purchase price and structure, the second item, the minimum purchase price. So certainly, and we don't have an idea of what that would look like right now, but certainly we feel that there has to be, you know, a lot of value created by doing this thing, whether that comes in a dramatic decrease in our dry year liability or something else. I think that that's really important, and we recognize that. So I think that's a critical factor, and so we wouldn't really move forward if we felt that it didn't generate enough revenue to be able to accomplish that goal.
So I think part of what you're hearing from us in terms of feedback is the discussion in isolation of some dollar metrics is not feeling like a complete discussion. And so maybe, I mean, you've heard some discussions, I think, from I think it was from you on different ways to think about the amount of money. But I guess you've heard some other thoughts from Commissioner Melton, you know, where you might say, gee, if we did this, would it be enough money to build the pipeline? In one of those forms or some other form, it might be really helpful to make something like a minimum revenue an integral part of the discussion going forward, rather than just sort of an ancillary part of the discussion. I can even imagine that you might get to where the city's recommendation to go forward attaches a minimum revenue below which we won't even consider bids, for example.
I just wanted to, I don't know that this, well, let me just say what I have on my mind. I would not be, if I were you, I would not be comfortable going to the Finance Committee just yet with this proposal. I think it needs to be fleshed out, and revenue assumptions, you know, put all the disclaimers on it you want, but there's got to be some discussion of, or some feel at least of what kind of a deal might be doable, and because it, you know, well, the way it feels right now is it's hard to make a decision. It's easy to make a decision, which might be the right decision, which is Commissioner Egglash's decision. Don't do it. Don't even, you know, let's not even talk about this anymore. Let's not spend any more time on it. But if that's not the decision, then I think there needs to be more information, even if it's assumptions and labeled as assumptions or labeled as possibilities, or before you run it on up the line to the Finance Committee.
So I just wanted to build on a point on the same vein about additional analysis or discussion, and it had to do with what Commissioner English started to develop. This whole idea is we're approaching, and I think you helped illustrate the uncertainty of it as we approach the 2018 timeframe when the formula may change. It really is worthy of a discussion as to whether this is the opportune time, because the uncertainties are stacked in the city's favor, versus as we approach 2018 in discussions and the understanding of how the formulas might change, might affect the balance of benefits to the city, in terms of our negotiating strength. For example, if the ISG formula was completely removed from the drought calculation, at that point, would our 2 MGD look better to the outside world, the community that is potentially the buyer set, or would it look worse? I think it's worth having that discussion, because we're not that far away from 2018.
Commissioner Foster, your light's on, or did you want to say anything else? Okay, I've got a few questions and comments myself. And please, guys, jump in if you have any questions about what I'm asking. I'm just curious right now, what happens when we don't use the water that we're not using of our supply guarantee? What happens to that water?
So, right, we have an ISG of 17.07, but all the other Bosque agencies and there's some anomalies here, but more or less have an ISG as well, and that adds up to about 184 MGD. And historically, and this hasn't been an issue with the drop in water demand over the last 4 or 5 years, I don't think, but earlier than that, some agencies have gone above their ISG. And so, but in total, we've been below that 184 number. And so, in some sense, and there's never been a penalty associated with that. So really, if we don't use it, someone else may. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. The other way is, it flows down the river, or there's a variety of different perspectives. And I don't know, Jane, do you want to add anything to that? Yeah, we don't pay. We just pay based on how much we use.
Yeah,
right?
I'm not as concerned about the paying part. I'm just interested to know what happens to the water. So some of it just gets lost. It's unused, perhaps. Okay.
Well, yeah,
Or
it stays in the system.
Yeah.
To the extent, we're under 184, it's going to build up in a reservoir or it's going to go down the river. That's basically it. It's going to be, to the extent everybody's under that 184, we're going to have fewer droughts, basically, or fewer water shortages.
I'm curious, are you only considering a term of a perpetual sale? Or are there short-term sales? Are there 5-year, 1-year sales?
So the contract, the water supply agreement with San Francisco, contemplates a sale, and it doesn't have a whole lot of detail on it, but that is actually included in there, that it has to be. Our interpretation is that it is a permanent transfer.
So you can't rent the water.
Okay, I think that's it for my questions. On your potential use of the proceeds, I think some other commissioners have said some of this, but I think probably because it's potentially such a small dollar number, I don't think the offset of future rate increases makes sense as a potential use of the proceeds. I haven't heard a lot of demand for the recycled water project, so I'm a little bit leery of that, but maybe if it helps us in drought years, it might be, maybe fund conservation programs doesn't seem to make sense for me. But the other two possibilities of somehow dealing with, these dry year deficiencies That seems like an interesting use, potential use of the proceeds. I have another question about the existing wells or plans to improve wells.
Excuse me, if I may. Why are you so quick to reject just giving it back to the ratepayers?
Just because it seems like such a small number. So if you're gonna give back 4% to the ratepayers, is that really worth the risks involved? So it's just kind of I can't see how that justifies the risks of the sale.
Can you remind us of whether most of our water bill is paid by residents or businesses? I'm just sitting here doing a little math in my head. I mean, if we have 15,000 households and we're talking about $1 million a year, that's almost $100 per household a year, which doesn't sound like 4%, which doesn't sound like a small amount of money. So I'm guessing that the flaw in my rough calculation is allocating costs appropriately between residents and business.
It's about 50-50 split between residents and businesses.
So maybe you can do this in your head better than I can, since I seem to be missing it by a mile. If we generated, say, $1 million a year of revenue out of this sale, and if we chose to give it all back to the ratepayers consistent with the various guidelines for doing so, a typical homeowner maybe would save as much as $50 a year. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's 500,000 divided by 25. There's 25,000.
Okay, so $500,000 divided by 25,000 households is only $20 a year. Okay, now it is sounding like a small number again. Okay,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
confirming my gut instinct.
Yeah,
No,
thank you. Yeah, so that is a small number. Okay. Thank you.
The existing wells that we have or plans to improve the wells, with those, do we reach that I think you talked about a limit of 1.2 million gallons per day of a limit that we could get out of the groundwater? Do we have that right now? Do we have the ability, the capacity to get that water?
Yeah, we have the well project is almost complete. There's the El Camino well, which is in the final stages, and we've actually applied with CDPH, California Department of Public Health, to designate that well as active. So that would be a primary resource that we would probably rely on during a drought to fulfill that 1,500 or that 1.2 MGD option.
Okay, good. So that's wells isn't an option, or it wouldn't be a wise use of the money to do more wells, or, I mean, we've already got that taken care of, it sounds like.
Yeah, we have, with the well project, we have a lot of capacity. And the well project is primarily for emergency purposes. So, they're for fire flows and for, if there's an interruption of SFPUC supplies. You may recall that as part of the preliminary assessment, we did identify that we feel we have this new well system, and considering there's a price differential between San Francisco cost and pumping groundwater, that it would be a good idea to look into what are our options related to taking more groundwater, and we're currently working on that. I don't know when we may have something in the early 2014 or something to bring forward to you on that issue. But taking into account quality issues, that 1.2 MGD limitation, and a whole host of other things. But we are evaluating that.
So, in general, I think that I don't really see a particular urgency to sell this water supply. I mean, I don't see. I don't see a clamoring for this. I don't see a great deal of benefit. However, I do think planning for the possibility is wise, especially if we could use those funds wisely. And the wise use of those funds, as Commissioner Melton explained, would be to pay for some sort of alternative supply. And I think Commissioner Waldfogel would say the same thing if he were here today. So I think I do think actually it's a worthwhile exercise to go through this thought process, and I appreciate that you're doing it. I agree that you'll learn a lot. Hopefully, learn something from the discussion that will inform how you go forward. I also have an uneasy feeling about that we have all of our water eggs are in one basket, with them all being in the Hetch Hetchy system. Now, I think it's a very robust basket that's just been improved, and it's gonna hold our water well. If I were Commissioner Aglash and had a good pun for it, I'd say that. But I do. So I'd put that in there as part of my feeling about the water system, is just that uneasy feeling that somehow we've got it all in there. Of course, we don't, because you just described the well system,
But I believe we have discussed in the past the risk to the Hetch Hetchy system in the event of a massive Northern California earthquake, right?
I don't recall a conversation on the subject. I will say that the Water System Improvement Program, which is the real driver for why San Francisco costs are going up, does have level of service goals, which dramatically reduce the time that previously that Hetch Hetchy might go offline. I think that number was at one point estimated to be up to 60 days. And the level of service goal now with the Water System Improvement Program complete is 24 hours 24 hours. Wintertime flows within 24 hours. So that's a big jump. And certainly our well system would bridge that 24-hour gap, or even longer if the San Francisco couldn't come online in that level of service, that goal.
Okay, I just think it's another item that we want to think about in this process. And one other thing that may be even less viable or interesting is reverse osmosis. So I don't know if that is, as a use of proceeds in order to provide backup water supply, in particular for drought years, does reverse osmosis make any sense? I know it's very expensive, but I know it's being used more and more across the globe. So I just want to throw that out there. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
I mean, we haven't gone to the detail of what technology might be appropriate, but certainly as part of the preliminary assessment in the IRP process, and considering that we have the new well system, we're looking at our options in terms of using more groundwater under normal, and also specifically during dry year scenarios. I mentioned that there is a quality differential between Hetch Hetchy and groundwater, so certainly that's another option, in that we could treat the water to a level that's comparable to Hetch Hetchy. That does involve some costs, but certainly one of the wells, El Camino, that supplies the dry year, could supply the bulk of the dry year, 1.2 MGD. If we could improve the quality, that increases consumer acceptance, and then we could rely on it, earlier in a drought.
I had a question for the chair. By reverse osmosis, are you talking about desalination of like seawater? You weren't really talking about treating the groundwater.
I wasn't. So,
okay.
But I'm glad that you misunderstood it to be that, because that may be more valuable than what I was thinking about. But is there a possibility that we could invest in a system that would allow us to desalinate either bay water is really what it would be.
And so there are a variety of kind of pilot studies going on. I think there's one in Contra Costa County that involves EBMUD, Santa Clara Valley Water District, and the SFPUC about a desal facility. And then there's also the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agencies that represents all the wholesale customers of San Francisco, is also evaluating a brackish desal facility, actually in close proximity to here. And so, those are large scale projects typically. And so we leave that, we participate, but we kind of leave it up to them.
As I'm sure you know, but for the benefit of anyone who doesn't, those kinds of projects, and just in general looking at urban water infrastructure, has become a major and active area of research by cities and universities. Our neighbor Stanford has a major new NSF research center on reinventing urban water infrastructure, led by Professor Dick Luthi, who many of you know personally. So we have millions of dollars a year of research going on just a couple miles from here on exactly what we've been talking about, on how to handle urban water systems in drought-prone areas like Northern California. So if we wanted to take more of an integrated systems approach that considered things like desalination and looked at watershed management in an integrated way that took a look at where rainfall goes and where our creeks go and what happens with water used for landscaping and so on, we certainly have some of the world's experts in the area, and for all I know, City of Palo Alto is already working with some of those folks.
We've already gone on quite a long time, but I do think it's an important topic. I have one last comment. Nico, were you going to respond at all, or are you just to that? You looked like you were looking up something.
I was just looking at the preliminary assessment because we did identify and mention that there's various desal activities going on and that we're participating in those.
So my final comments are just on trying to take a look at this, not driving the conversation with some short-term, should we sell the water now, but I do think water, as someone who works in electricity, I think water is really the most interesting topic going forward. I think if we do figure out how to provide clean, affordable electricity, then the sort of next question is, what do we do about water? I think if we've fought wars recently about energy sources and fuel in particular, the next war is maybe all about water. There's going to be a lot of problems about water. As Commissioner Eglas said, you compound that problem of a cherished resource with the problem of climate change, and we may reduce the amount of water that we even have to split among a much larger population. I think this is a momentous decision, and I think we should. I'm really glad that you're looking into it, and I think it's really important. I think we should be really cautious about selling the water, because I do think in the future water will become more and more valuable. Of course, we don't know what will happen in our kind of near term of 2018 with our allocation, but I do think prices will likely go up in the future, and so in some ways that if we have this supply in the future, we may be able to get more out of it. So I just throw that as a final caution, and that I don't like to see us moving forward unless there's some burning need to sell these. I think that we want to hold on to this resource if we can. We may not be able to, and only time will tell. But I just think we need to. I do think it's very important how we handle this. So that's my final comment. So thank you very much. On to item number 3. Any potential topics for discussion of future UIC meetings? Commissioner Foster.
Although, remind me, when is our next discussion on Palo Alto Green, and how are we in general proceeding on that? All right, I didn't look at my rolling calendar. Okay, so I'll revise my question. What exactly are we going to do in December? Are we looking at something that we would potentially recommend to finance and on the city council, or is it sort of another discussion?
We're working on making a recommendation to you on what should happen with the Palo Alto Green Gas Program.
Okay. I guess I would continue to advocate that we continue to look at options in addition to green gas on the electric side.
Yeah, and we were already planning to come back to you. I think it's in the March timeframe, letting you know what monies are left, at least in the current account, and then moving forward, talking a bit more about what it could look like going forward. But part of it is we did owe you an update early next year.
Thanks. Those will be great discussions. Looking forward to that too. Anyone else? Okay. Our next scheduled meeting. Let's skip over. Commissioner comments. Commissioner comments? Anyone? Okay. Our next scheduled meeting, November 6th. Is that correct? That's what it says on here. Okay. Great. Thanks very much. Meeting adjourned.